All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Classic Comics Trek Talk live stream. So, going to be a little different this week. This week, what we're going to do is instead of just me reviewing a regular episode, I'm going to be taking a look at the original version of The City on the Edge of Forever. Now, as I said in the last Trek Talk that I did a couple of weeks ago, when I looked at the Star Trek episode of the City on the Edge of Forever. Of course, the story that was aired was quite different from the original story, from the original teleplay that Harlan Ellison wrote. And that in it of itself isn't unusual. A lot of Star Trek episodes went through heavy rewrites before they, from their original version to the version that was aired. But City on the Edge of Forever is, of course, particularly significant because it's often cited as being one of, if not the best, Star Trek episode ever. And it also it won awards. Uh, Harlan Ellison won a Writers Guild Award for that episode, but he won for the version that was never made and was never actually aired. And in addition, it also, I think, it won a Hugo Award, I think, too, as well. So it's a pretty important episode in the history of Star Trek. And I thought it would be interesting to look at the actual version that he did. So it's available in a comic book form. I'm going to bring that up here. Okay, here we go. Now, this was published by IDW, I believe, back in, I think it was 2014 or somewhere around there. So ship's log stardate 3134.6. Our chronometers still run backward. We have followed the radiation to its source here at the rim of the galaxy, but something else is happening. When we left Earth, each of the 450 crewmen of the Enterprise was checked out stable, but in 2 years, so much stress on them. We have continuous psych probes, but we know some have been altered. Some who may have gone sour, we can't know until the flaw shows up. But by then, of course, it's too late. Now, bear in mind that when Harlan Ellison wrote this, and I talked about this in the last stream, uh, Ellison was one of the first writers that Ellison commissioned, or that Roddenberry commissioned to do an episode. And this story was one of the first ones that was approved to go to a story. So when Ellison was writing this, Star Trek was still very much in a kind of formative phase, and it wasn't really clear, I guess, that what all or exactly how the characters were going to be, what the show was going to be. And one of the big differences is how he has members of the Enterprise crew behaving, because he has in particular one guy who is very corrupt, and we'll see in a moment here. So what we see is a crewman here, Lieutenant Beckwith, and he is basically selling drugs. He's selling a narcotic called the Jewels of the Music of the Spheres, I think, or Jewels of the Spheres, and it's some kind of a alien narcotic, and he is basically dealing drugs, and he's got this guy here whose name is Lebec, and Lebec is a junkie, basically. He says, Beckwith, stop, give me one. Jewels of sound, so expensive, so illegal. You want me to give your dream narcotic they've banned throughout the galaxy? Tis tis, Lieutenant, how far you've fallen. And Lebec says, I won't beg. And Beckwith says, no, how long have you been my man, Lieutenant? How long have you been hooked on the jewels? You gave me my first taste on Karkow. That was a year ago. One taste and I was addicted. I need one, so stop playing with me. And Beckwith says, I want to know about that planet out there, what the log says about valuable commodities. I'll want a landfall pass, and I'll want to you to cover for me when I trade with the natives. And Lebec says, after the slaughter you caused on Harper 5, you'll do it again. If Kirk finds out, he won't find out, will he, Lieutenant? If he does, you'll never hear these jewels sing inside you again. I'm coming back from this a rich man, and I'm never going out to space again. Nobody's getting in my way, Lebec. I want to live an elegant life, but that takes resources. And Lebec says, so you cheat aliens, get them hooked on illegal narcotics, and steal what they could trade for cultural advances. Hooked like you, Lebec. Hooked like you. Yeah, like me, and I'm already paying. But you'll pay a little more. Now, do I get what I want? So Lebec takes one of these jewels and swallows it. And it has some sort of mind-altering property. I mean, they don't go into specifics on it, but clearly it's it's doing a number on him. And then later he is on the bridge. Spock says, Mr. Lebec, damp that starboard unit. You're running in the red. You'll blow the entire drive. And Lebec's clearly not all there. He has to be dragged off of his station. You've been walking around this bridge like a man underwater for 2 hours. If you're unwell, have yourself placed on relief and leave the bridge. And Lebec's like, well, I've been here 2 hours already. So he goes to Beckwith and says, I'm done. I almost disabled the ship. Whatever Kirk wants to do with me, I'll deserve it, but I'm turning you in. And Lebec then chases Lebec down in the hallway and bashes his head in with, I don't know what this thing is. And I guess this is Uhura who's seeing him do this. And then he runs, he attacks this red shirt. And I swear that this story, it wouldn't go nearly as far if it weren't for the fact that Beckwith is basically unstoppable. I mean, I lose track of how many times in this story he attacks a crewman and beats the crap out of him. But he overpowers this red shirt, whacks him with the laser or phaser rifle, then goes into the transporter room. So I guess security is called. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Rand come running. Spock says he's sealed the transporter room from the other side. And Rand plays a kind of significant part early in the story. And as I say, this was written early on before Grace Lee Whitney was dismissed from the show. And early on in the show, Rand was the plan was kind of her to have her be a significant character. So she starts cutting it open with a phaser. Spock says, I can hear the transporter has been activated. They come in. And of course, the transporter chief, Beckwith, beat him up too, and then overpowered him, and I think took his phaser and then beamed down to the planet. So Kirk orders a landing party to go down and chase him. Ship's log, stardate 3133.4. This cinder, this empty death of a world. This is the source of the strange radiation that had our clocks running backward. How odd that Beckwith should choose this ghost of a world for his escape. I am transporting 2 ships for patrol. Rand, Spock, myself, and 6 enlisted crew. We'll find him. But something more important has us nervous. A world with a dying sun such as this, it should be frigid, without atmosphere. But we aren't cold, and we can breathe. So Rand detects the source of the radiation, and it's coming from the mountains, and Beckwith's tracks are leading in that direction as well. And then up in the mountain peaks, they see what appears to be a city. Mr. Spock, do you see the city up there? Do you see it too? It is there, Captain. It is illogical, but it is apparently real. Like a city on the edge of forever. So they enter the city, look around, then they come and they find these 6 tall aliens who are just kind of standing there. This is another big difference. Instead of simply one guardian of forever who is this kind of sentient apparatus, we have these 6 aliens who identify themselves as the Guardians of Forever, and they guard or monitor the vortex. Who are you? We are the Guardians of Forever. You live in that city since before your sun burned hot in space, before your race was born. This place is dead, empty. Why do you stay? Only on this world do the million pulse flows of time and space merge. Only here do the flux lines of forever meet. Only here can exist the gateway to the past where the time vortex of the ancients can work. Only here. And we were set to watch the time vortex so many hundreds of centuries ago that even we do not have clear memories of it. The gateway to the past, a time machine, not a machine, a creation, a vortex. And Spock asks, have you seen another man dressed as we are? What we see has already been or is yet to be. No, no other like you. And then in the next panel, we see Beckwith lurking in the shadows and he's observing what's going on. Kirk says, I always thought stories about time machines were the drunk stuff of lab technicians when they'd had too much pure grain to drink. And the Guardians say that which is. Pure matter built by a science man will not understand for 100,000 times the span of years he has already existed. And it's possible to go back and forward in time. All time, all space, they meet in this brightness, the vortex. Can you give us a demonstration? Is that possible? Time is weary for the craftsman who cannot demonstrate his craft. We have nothing to do but desire to show you. The past. Can you show us the pasts of any world? Yes, we can. And Kirk requests the past of Earth. So we see the dinosaurs, we see the age of sail. Then we get up eventually into the 30s, and then Kirk asks them to hold it there, which in the episode, the Guardian says he can't do. He says he can't really restrict or control how time is presented. He can only present it in one particular way. So then there's a lot of conversation about the vortex and how it works and where it came from and why they're there. And they kind of realize that there's this zone of, I don't know, what you might call anti-time or frozen time around the planet, and that's why the planet still has an atmosphere and all that, and it's still it's not completely lifeless. Yeah, they've created a zone of no time here. If they can control time, how much simpler it must be for them to control the atmosphere. There is wisdom that lesser species have not grasped. Perhaps you who call yourselves men will be the next to guard all of time. But if this is true, how old are you? If time does not move at its normal rate here, how long have you been here to be as old as you are? And at that point, Beckwith makes a break for it. They see Beckwith. Kirk says, "Get him." Now Spock knocks the phaser out of his hand, and then he just levels Spock with a single punch. Then he grabs hold of Rand for some reason, but then Rand is able to overpower him, when Spock couldn't. So Beckwith heads for the vortex. Kirk tries to stop him, but he manages to or Kirk tries to stop him. He shoves Kirk away and dives through into the time vortex, and he is gone. And that's the first issue. And Kirk says he went back. Yes, the vortex was active. Your world, your old Earth. All past history has been changed. Kirk says, but how can that be? It all looks the same here. Yes, here, but from here outward, everything has been changed. It is another universe in which we stand. And Spock asks, how has it been changed? The time flow has been diverted. We are being summoned. The machines of the ancients are registering traumas in time. We must return. And then these aliens all vanish. And Kirk says, we have to get back to the ship. So Spock tells Rand to signal the Enterprise for beam up. So then the enlisted men beam up first, the red shirts. Then Kirk, Spock, and Rand beam up, and they discover they are not on the Enterprise. And there's a completely different ship, a completely different crew, and they look like pretty sketchy, kind of like space pirates or something. And one guy says, "Welcome to the Condor. Whoever you are, you shouldn't have come aboard." And they realize that, yeah, time has been changed and that they're not on the Enterprise. So he orders Rand to use her tricorder to cause a feedback loop in the transporter console, which blows. And then a fight ensues, and they manage to overpower the renegades and drive them out of the transporter room and then seal it up. The door is sealed, Captain, but it can't imagine it will hold for long. And Rand asks, "Where's the Enterprise crew?" And he says, "Not here, maybe nowhere." Logically, with time altered, they were possibly never born, or they have become those. And outside, this guy gives orders to have them burn through the door. And Kirk says, "We have to go back and change things." And she tells Rand and the red shirts to hold the transporter room as long as they can. And of course, she says, "How long?" And he says, "Indefinitely. We have no idea." And despite the fact that they blew up the transporter console, somehow the transporter still works. I don't understand how that works. Seems like it shouldn't, but apparently it does. So Kirk and Spock beam back down. And again, it's kind of very similar to the original episode here. Kirk says, "Let us follow Beckwith back and we'll change time back." But the Guardians say the rope of the time stream knots and knots again. It is far more dangerous attempting to unsnarl the past than it is to let time flow on. Let it go. And Kirk says, "Well, that's not that easy for us. Everything we know or cared about is gone. You are children believing you can put smoke back into a bottle." And Spock asks, "Is time immutable, or can it be set back as it was before Beckwith's intercession caused the knotting?" And the Guardians say, "The man, Beckwith, he is a serious impediment in the time flow. He is scar tissue, a clot in the coronal bloodstream. Do you know the concept of evil?" And Kirk says, "We do. Send us back and we will retrieve him." There is a problem, though. There is always a problem. Time cannot be doubled. And Spock says, "Basic physics. Two objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. You cannot send us back to the precise time of Beckwith's disappearance, can you?" And they say, "No, before or after, but not the same." So they discuss it and they decide that they'll have the Guardian send them back to shortly before Beckwith arrives so that hopefully they'll be there ready and waiting when he comes through. They enter the vortex. And again, this is very similar to the episode. They arrive in 1930s New York. And hold on, let me take a drink of water right quick. Okay. So they arrive in 1930s New York. Now, it does play out a little differently, though. They first arrive, and there's a man on a street corner who's railing against all the problems in the country, the depression, and says that it's because there's too many foreigners in the country. And then he sees Spock, and he believes Spock is Chinese, I think, basically, and says, "There's one of those troublemakers now. Let's show him how. Why don't we show him how we like his kind?" So then the mob attacks Kirk and Spock, and then Kirk whips out a phaser and like destroys a street lamppost, which I'm pretty sure would not be keeping with the Prime Directive. And they flee, and then they hide in the basement of a building. And we'll go to the third issue here. Now, again, they're in a basement very much like in the episode. Spock reacts quite emotionally to this whole incident. A barbarian world, and Kirk says they were afraid and hungry. Spock says, as violent as any aboriginal world we ever landed on. And Kirk says, all right, look, we're safe now. I would call this anything but safe. Barbarians. You're an accomplished ethnologist, Spock. You know all races go through a violent phase. My race never languished in such ignorant behavior for thousands of years. We went to space in peace. Earthmen came with all of this behind them. And Kirk starts getting a bit snippy with him, and he says, yeah, and that's why we hit space 200 years, or you hit space 200 years after us. So again, this is very early on, and the history of Star Trek that we know isn't established yet. And so Kirk is saying that humans got into space before the Vulcans. And of course, Spock is also saying we never had any like barbarism like this in our past. But of course, in established lore, we know that the Vulcans were actually very violent for a long time before they embraced logic. And Kirk says, I should have left you for that mob. And then Spock realizes I may have spoken out of turn. And they realize they both probably said some things they shouldn't have said. Kirk says, I saw some clothes on a line. I'll see if I can get some. And so he goes steal some clothes. And then and some of the images in this, obviously the artist is pulling from images from the episode. Like this right here, it's obviously right out of the episode itself. Now, of course, in the established episode, this is where they would meet Edith Keeler. But that's not how it plays out here. Instead, this man comes down, and I don't know if they ever even give this guy a name, but it turns out they're in the basement of his place, not in the basement of the mission. And again, they apologize for sneaking in and say, it was cold outside, and he says, it's okay. He is basically has an attitude of, times are tough, and I know people are doing what they have to get by here and there. Then he says he needs a couple of people to clean up the alley and sweep out the air shaft. I'll be willing to let you bunk out down here in exchange for work and give you some bedding. And they don't really have anywhere else to go, so they accept. Later, as they're cleaning up, they discuss Beckwith and talk about, let's see. It seems dubious we will find the vocal point of this period hidden away in a garbage dump. I was thinking about that. If Beckwith will be drawn to it, won't the same apply to us? Perhaps, but what if he gets to it before we do? So they get their tricorder. Kirk tells the tricorder to integrate all data on old Earth, year 1930, old style, compute for variables resulting in major alterations of historical flow. When these variables have been postulated, integrate for the crisis points. And the tricorder says integration procedure involves seventh level extrapolation and attendant internal function overloads and failure. So basically, it's going to risk overloading the thing or damaging it if it performs this calculation. Kirk says give estimated time, and it says 3 hours Earth time, so they tell it to proceed. Spock says that much integrating at that level for that intensive a period may well burn out the circuits. The tricorder is a self-contained unit with no dependence on the Enterprise's power, and as the Enterprise no longer exists, that is fortunate. Kirk says, I hear a but it is a unit of finite power. Sending this excessive a task may burn out the circuits. Its value to us in this barbaric past is inestimable. Kirk says, if we get our answer, it won't matter. You don't make a half bad Chinese laborer. They barely looked at you in that movie theater last night. Movie theater, you have an amazing facility for picking up the local language patterns, Captain, but we do not seem much closer to locating that monster Beckwith. Time is relative. He hasn't even come through yet. We have a lot of time. Now, I guess the time has passed, so they check the tricorder and it has performed the calculations. And Spock tells it to list all the vocal points. Preliminary listing involves 616,590 focal points. Eliminate all but those within a 10-kilometer radius of our present coordinates. And the tricorder says it can't do that and says that the circuits are damaged, only partial data available. And Kirk tells it to go ahead and do it anyway. Now, and I forgot to mention this earlier. Let me go back to the previous issue. So where can I find that? Let me see here. Okay, here it is. So let me bring this up. I should have mentioned this earlier. So let me bring this down. Stop sharing there. Okay. Bring this up. Okay. So before they left, when they were speaking with the Guardians said, let's see. If we bring him back, then okay. So Kirk tells them to send them back, and the Guardians say they can do it, but in each time period there is a focal point, an object, a person, something that is indispensable to the normal flow of time, unimportant otherwise, but as a catalyst. And Kirk says if we bring him back, then the river resumes its natural course and everything goes back the way it was. And if Beckwith tampers with it, time is changed permanently. And Spock asks, will Beckwith know what this focal point is? And they say no, but the stresses of the time flow will draw him to it. If he influences it, nothing can restore the shape of the past. And Kirk asks, then how can we stop him? And they say, bring him back. He will seek that which must die and give it life. Stop him. So he will seek that which will die, must die, and he will give it life. And Kirk says, I don't understand. Can you tell us more? Blue it will be, blue as the sky of old earth and as clear as truth. And the sun will burn on it, and there is the key. Blue it will be, blue as the sky of old earth and clear as truth, and the sun will burn on it, and there is the key. Okay, because that's going to figure in later. It's kind of important. Now let's get back. Okay, so the tricorder starts doing the calculation Kirk wants and says blue, the burning sun, the key, and then it craps out and stops working. And Kirk says that takes care of that. Wasn't the blue the sun? Wasn't it what the Guardian said? Something like that. Did you make any sense of it? A description, perhaps, but it was no help before we came through the vortex, and it is not much help now. And Kirk says, can you fix it? Dubious, Captain. The transistor has not been invented yet, nor the printed circuit, nor the mnemonic memory cube. But as always, sir, I can try. And Kirk says he's going to go out and find work, and Spock says perhaps I should do the same. And Kirk says, forget it, I need you working on that tricorder so we can get a fix on how long it'll be before Beckwith arrives. Besides, it's too risky. And of course, the man wants to know, what do you mean too risky? And Kirk says, well, I'm worried about my friend here going out in public. And he says, I got a job down the street that he can fill. So Spock gets a job. It looks like he's doing dishes somewhere. Like, I don't know if it's supposed to be in a restaurant or not. All right, hold on just a moment. Okay. And the guy that Spock is working for tries to kind of shortchange him. But then after he's done with his work, he's leaving and just going back to the apartment. And then finally, we get Edith Keeler. Spock is walking down the street and he sees her speaking on a street corner. And then he sees that she's wearing a bright blue cloak. And the cloak is held by a clasp that looks like a sunburst. And Spock remembers the line, blue it will be, blue as the sky of old Earth, and clear as truth, and the sun will burn on it. And he realizes, oh, and there is the key, of course, and her name is Keeler. And Spock puts it together and realizes this woman must be the key that we're looking for. And he tells this to Kirk, who says this is an amazing coincidence. And Spock says there are no coincidences in time. The Guardian said Beckwith will be drawn to the focal point as we were. It was inevitable. So they realize, she's the focal point, and they wonder, is time going to be changed because of something she does or because of something she doesn't do? But they decide they've got to keep her under surveillance. And then they discuss Beckwith again about whether he's arrived yet or not. And Kirk keeps quizzing Spock. Do you think he's here yet? Do you think he's arrived? And how the heck should Spock know? And Spock's, in his Vulcan way, is basically saying, "Look, I don't know. I have no idea. How would I know?" As he says, he could have come through already, but he says, "Yeah, I won't know if we won't know if I extrapolate correctly until he is drawn to the Keeler woman." So later that night, they're observing from across a nearby building, which is kind of creepy. And then Kirk makes a comment about how she's very lovely, and then Spock starts to kind of chide Kirk, saying, "Look, we're on a mission here. We got a job to do. No time for this." And Kirk is basically denying that he's got romantic interests in her, which, well, then why did you mention how pretty she is? And then he chances to meet her, and it's not clear if it was on accident or deliberate. I mean, it seems to be deliberate. So they make some small talk, and there's, an obvious attraction. And she asks him to walk her to down to the police precinct because there's some kids that stole some stuff, and she's helping to smooth it out without the kids getting arrested or something like that, I guess. And they walk out the door together, and Spock is looking on disapprovingly. Okay. Now, time passes. I mean, we don't know how much, but Edith and Kirk are starting to get involved. And again, Kirk knows right from the start that, there's a pretty good chance this woman is going to have to die in order for the future to be saved, but he's still getting involved with her. And when I talked in the, about the original episode, I said, the one big flaw I think with this episode is how, you know, they come back in time to fix some alterations in time that one of the crew caused. But then while they're there, Kirk is getting into this romantic relationship with someone in the past. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? And it seems even more glaring now when Kirk knows right from the minute he meets her, he knows that, oh, she may have to die for things to be set right. And they have another conversation. And, she can tell that there's a lot of things that he isn't telling her and that he's withholding things. And obviously he's conflicted because he knows that she may have to die. He has this flashback here where he and Spock are talking. And again, Spock basically just says, "You are my captain. It is not proper that I express such opinions. If I'm wrong, I want to know. That is my opinion. Why? It's necessary to be near her. We can't possibly know the precise moment Beckwith will find her. You argue you argue illogically, Captain. I do not think Beckwith is what keeps you so near this woman. You're wrong. I do not think so. Since when did you become a telepath? Empathy is not telepathy. I can feel it coming off you in waves. You are getting involved." And Kirk insists, "I just want to find Beckwith." "Captain, fooling me is simple. Just give me the order. I will change my opinion." "But we talk, Mr. Spock. We sit and we talk about everything. She is a fine person." And let's see, "Listen, I've been on the move since I was old enough to ship on as a wiper in one of those old chemical fueled rockets. It's been a long time, Mr. Spock, a lot of time. And the women you have known have been casual liaisons in the port cities and the pleasure planets. It is that way for every spacer, Captain. I am Vulcan. I am not neuter. I understand very well." So again, this is pretty early on, and in this version of the timeline, we still had chemical fueled rockets when Kirk was a young man. So what, maybe a decade earlier? And Spock mentions having Congress with women in different ports. So obviously the Pon Far thing isn't established yet. And Kirk insists that let's see, but that this is something else, Spock. Total communication. I've never known anything like this with anyone. She knows, Spock. She understands everything. It can be a foolish thing, Captain. We are only phantoms here, things lost from the future that may not even exist again. We have not yet been born. Lost things set down on an alien shore. Why? Why does it have to end here? You cannot change the past without changing the future. Why can't I bring her back with me? She isn't important here. The way she feels, the goodness, the things she believes, the world, they're not ready for it. And Spock then just lays it out. She's going to die. I was able to repair the tricorder, not well, but sufficiently to learn that she will die. And Kirk, of course, doesn't like hearing this. "Captain, she has to die. The Guardian told us. We had insufficient codification to interpret the metaphors, but I have been resonating the words again in my mind. He will seek that which must die and give it life. Stop him." "I don't believe that. They didn't mean that at all. How could her death alter the course of history?" "In a million ways. If she lived, she might give birth to a child who would become a dictator." "That's all extrapolation, none of it real. You're guessing." "Yeah, but that's what you've been asking him to do pretty much all through this story, Kirk. In a few years, this planet will have a war, a great war. What if her philosophy spread and it kept America out of the war for a mere 2 years? And in that time, Germany perfected its atomic weapons. The outcome of the war would be reversed. That's insanity." "History, Captain. There are spools of records on the Enterprise. I have played them all. What I suggest is just one logical extrapolation. She has to die. History and time demand it." "I don't want to think about it. Leave me alone." "I will leave you alone, Captain." but time will not. And you can see how they had to trim this thing down because, I mean, there is a lot of conversation. It does make the story better, but there's no way this would have fit into a single episode. This would have had to be a two-parter at least. And even then, that probably still would have required some significant trimming. And so then, I guess a night or two later, they're walking together. They hear some music coming from a nearby music hall. So she wants to go inside. So they're going down the steps, and she slips and falls on the steps. Now, of course, in the original episode, there's a scene where she does that. She slips and falls on the steps, and Kirk catches her. It's in a different context. And here, so she slips and falls, and Kirk starts to grab her. Then he pulls his hands away and lets her fall. And it's she seems awfully okay with him, choosing not to help her. Now, she turns out to be not seriously hurt, but he's obviously shaken by the incident. And I wonder why she doesn't like why didn't you help me? Why did you just let me fall like that? So the next day, they're watching this particular spot, and Spock thinks that, according to his calculations, this is where Beckwith should appear. And then, sure enough, he appears. So then they chase after him. He immediately sees them and starts running. Uh, Spock tackles him, but again, Beckwith is basically invincible, and he quickly just kicks Spock away. And he runs away, and they realize he's heading in the direction of the soup kitchen. So Kirk goes to the soup kitchen, and he takes Edith out of the soup kitchen and takes her back to her apartment and tells her to stay there and not leave. Obviously, he doesn't want her crossing paths with Beckwith. And she, of course, is bewildered by all this and wants to know what's going on. He's just like, trust me, it's for your own good. So Kirk and Spock go out to find Beckwith again. Mr. Spock, you can't know it is her. You can't know how it is with her. Are they still alive in the transporter chamber, Captain? You don't understand. I'm not what, Captain? A human? Perhaps to the pains and pleasures of love? No, that is true. I am merely part human, and I'm merely concerned with saving the lives of the ones who trusted us to save them. I can't let her die. I can't. Then Beckwith wins, and time has changed. So then Kirk grabs Spock's arm, and as he's got this little parcel or something under his arm, and when Kirk grabs his arm, it falls out from underneath his arm to the ground. It turns out there's a phaser in it. And Kirk says, you can't use that on Beckwith. We have to bring him back alive. And I guess maybe this was before they had established that phasers have stun settings. I don't know. But then Kirk realizes that phaser isn't for Beckwith, is it? Obviously, that he's contemplating using it on Edith if that's what's necessary. So Kirk goes looking for Beckwith. Beckwith gets the drop on him, kicks the crap out of Spock again, and takes his phaser and starts running. Spock pursues him. And we'll go to the next one. This is the final issue. Now, Beckwith gets away, so the following day, and this is a little subplot that honestly I don't really know why it's there, and I understand why they cut this out. So we start with this guy, an amputee, double amputee, who's got a sign, I fought at Verdun, which was a battle in the First World War, of course, so he's a veteran of that. And Kirk approaches him, and the man says, good apples, fella, 5 cents, pencils, I fought at Verdun. Someone told me to come see you. I just sell apples and pencils, 5 cents. Perhaps it's time for you to diversify. Who are you? And also, it seems pretty clear that this man he clearly looks like Harlan Ellison. He's clearly modeled after the author. I'm just a beau who needs some easy information. I don't know much except there's 9 guys on this block selling apples. There's $2 in it for a few words. I didn't do nothing. I've been selling right here. I'm not after you, mister. I want you to find out something for me. I was told you know everything that goes on in this neighborhood. Now, you want to make a couple of bucks. How do I know you ain't crooked? You'll just have to take a $2 chance. I'm looking for a man wearing peculiar clothes. And he says, what kind? And then Kirk has a parcel with him, so he pulls it open and shows his Starfleet uniform with the parabola, the delta on it. And of course, the guy says, what do you want him for? I want him for about $2. So suppose I got to find out before you give it to me. Later that night, Kirk and Edith are eating. Then Spock arrives. Well, actually, let me talk about this a second. It's a good scene. So the cake, did I make it too sweet? No, it's delicious. I've never tasted anything like it. You've never tasted angel food cake before. Jim, I'd like to ask you a great many questions, but I'm afraid you might give me answers. Are you going away, Jim? Perhaps I don't want to. It's that Chinese fellow, isn't it? In a way, I know him and he knows me. All my life I've belonged to other people. I know things will be cleaner, happier. I try to tell them so they'll wait and so they'll hope. But now I don't belong to anyone and I'm losing my own hope. You're right. There are a million tomorrows. The one you believe in is the best one. I know. How do you know, Jim? Because I love you and I know. And then Spock arrives. So Kirk leaves. And Spock says the little man without legs was here. Be curious to know how the man with no legs got up the stairs into the apartment building, then up the stairs to their apartment, but whatever. But anyway, he apparently has given them some information about where to find Beckwith, so they go looking for him. And Kirk pays him his money. And then Beckwith is up on a roof, so he hits Spock with a trash can. Then he fires his phaser, and somehow this man with no legs is able to, before Beckwith can shoot Kirk, is able to throw himself in the path of the phaser, and he takes the shot meant for Kirk. Yeah, I mean that's a little hard to credit, and I really just don't know why this subplot is in here, and I can see why they would have cut that out. But anyway, so Spock grabs the trash can. Now he grabs it and he crumples the metal with his hand. So, oh, hey, Gwagnar. Hello, sir. Good to see you. And hello, Jay Rocker. Good to see you too. So, with seeing Beckwith just overpower these people over and over again, I thought, okay, and particularly Spock, I thought, okay, well, this is before it's established that Spock has super strength basically. But then no, he is able to crush the metal in this trash can as he grabs it and he throws it at Beckwith. So I'm like, okay, well, if he could do that, how is Beckwith able to beat him up over and over again? But he throws the trash can at Beckwith, hits him, and that causes Beckwith to drop the phaser. And Kirk retrieves it. Let me take a drink of water right quick. Hold on. Okay. Any death in this era that alters the sum of intelligence alters time permanently, if he matters in the time flow. Why did he do that for you? Because I gave him $2. So then They find Edith again, and she is sermonizing on the street corner again. There are great times on the way, days of gold and nights of cool and sweet and nights cool and sweet smelling. This isn't the only happiness, this world turning under us. Look up tonight and you'll see them all out there, see them burning. And Spock says, she speaks as though you've talked to her. Her ideas are years ahead of their time. My race has a word for her kind of person, Lyra, or open. Yes, she is that too. So they see her walking across the street. She spots them and waves to Kirk. And then just down a little bit down the street, Beckwith emerges from an alley. She starts walking across the alley to Kirk. And again, in a scene very similar to the episode, the truck is coming. Beckwith sees her and sees the truck. And then Beckwith, who is the principal villain in this episode, tries to save her. And Kirk starts to, but then hesitates. So then Spock has to stop Beckwith, and he tackles Beckwith and lets the truck hit Edith and kill her. And of course, with the mission accomplished, they then come back through the vortex with Beckwith. And the Guardians say time has resumed its shape. What of the death of the cripple? And you can tell this was written a while ago. I don't think people in the 23rd century would be using the word cripple, probably, but he was negligible. Yeah, so he wasn't important. But we found Beckwith. He found Beckwith for us. He must have counted. He counted, but not enough, not in the eternal flow of the great river. Everything is the same as before, everything. Then Beckwith overpowers Spock and gets loose again, and then goes back into the vortex. He went back. It was all for nothing. And the Guardian says, no, the vortex cannot be set for the same exact time twice. He has created a fracture and plunged into it. Then where is he? Has he escaped? Not this time. He wanted forever. The vortex has given him forever. Like the Mobius strip that has no end, that curves back on itself eternally. He is locked in time. Forever, he cannot escape. His forever will be in the heart of an exploding sun. A nova, he has named his own doom. So apparently he's caught in some kind of a time loop inside a star. And so, yeah, I'm pretty safe to say he's gone. Now, later on the Enterprise, Spock visits Kirk. Coordinates from the bridge, Captain. Uh, and he says, Jim. And Kirk says, Mr. Spock, that's the first time you've ever called me anything but Captain. On my world, the nights are very long. The sound of the silvery birds against the sky is very sweet. My people know there is always time enough for everything. You could come with me for a rest. You would feel comfortable there. All the time in the world, and filled with tomorrows. But can you tell me something I need to understand, something that defies all logic? I would not intrude, but it troubles me. I believe that is the phrase. It troubles me deeply. You could not, you could not stop Beckwith. I understand that. But Beckwith, amoral, evil, a killer, selfish and capable of anything. Why did he try to save her at the risk of his own life? Yes. We look at our race, this parade of men and women and the unbelievable harm and cruelty they do. And we say, and we sigh, and we say, perhaps our time is past. Let the sharks or the cockroaches take over. And then, without knowing why, without even thinking of it, the worst among us does the great thing, the noble deed, that spark of impossible human godliness. And we say, perhaps the human race is entitled to a little more sufferance. Let them keep trying to reach the dream. Evil can come from good, and good from evil. But the little man, the trooper, he was negligible. He fought at Verdun, and he was negligible. And she, no, she was not negligible. But I loved her. No woman has ever loved as much, Jim, because no woman was ever offered the universe for love. Okay. So, rather poetic ending there from Spock. And Guagnar says, the hardcover, I have this story put out by Eagle Moss. It has a few pages of behind the scenes stuff in it. Oh, really? Interesting. According to the trade, Harlan Ellison wrote that character for himself to play, so they modeled him after Harlan from the comic. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of figured that's, I mean, I didn't know he wrote it so he could be in the episode. But yeah, then let me see if I can go back. But yeah, he's very clearly modeled after Ellison, where like right there particularly, he really looks like him. So yeah, I kind of suspected that. I didn't know he wrote it so he could actually play it in the episode, though. As I say in the live stream, the last live stream about the aired episode, that he was spending a lot of time on sets. He was clearly very interested in the show and in being a part of it, of course, initially before they did the rewrites. Okay, so well, I'm at 58 minutes, so right about at an hour. Good. Okay, so I will go ahead and wrap this up here. And next week will be Operation Annihilate, which is the final episode of the first season. And then after that, the week after that, I'll probably do one which will be a kind of a retrospective. I'll kind of just talk about the first season, give my thoughts on it. Probably I'll do like maybe a top 10 episodes or something like that. And also just talk about how the show was kind of impacting the culture at that time in the wake of that first season and how it was really catching on with some people, not so much with others. And then I guess the week after that, probably we'll move on to the second season. So until then, thank you, those who have tuned in for the live stream. Oh, please do like the stream before you leave. And please do sub to the channel. And maybe check out some of my other videos too. And I will see you all, I guess, well, I'll probably stream Sunday night. So that'll be my next stream. And I'll see you all then. Until then, everyone, have a good evening.